Welcome to an exciting episode of Here's What You Missed in Art Today. Today we began to go over different watercolor techniques. You're going to need a piece of pretty thick paper. I think this is about 70-pound sketch paper. It should work all right for this. If you have watercolor paper though, it'll work so much better. At the top, watercolor techniques. We're going to go over 8 of them today. So let's take this paper, divide them into 2, 4, 6, 8 sections. First section, we're going to label flat wash. Second section, gradient wash. Next section, wet on wet. Next section, color bleed. Next section, wax resist. Next section, tape resist. Next is going to be salt texture. SALT-TEXTURE. Last one, we're going to call it color pickup. Yeah, now we can see all of it. Alright, for this, if you want to do it at home, awesome. If you don't, you're lazy. Either way, you're going to need some supplies. Water cup, a set of watercolors. You're going to need a little bit of salt, just regular table salt. You don't even have to take it out of the shaker. You're going to need a little bit of tissue, you know, like that you use the bathroom with. Some tissue. You're going to need some tissue. You will also need a piece of crayon and a piece of tape. I don't know if I have any here at my desk. Hopefully I do. If I don't, that's okay. I'll get some in a little bit. Okay. We're going to start with the flat wash first. For a flat wash, you want your color to be just that. You want it to be flat. You want it to be solid and consistent. So your color isn't going to go from dark to medium to light or anything. You're going to pick one value of one color and make one section all the exact same. Easiest way to do this is to get some water in your brush, transfer it to one of your pans. If we're doing a flat wash, we're going to need a decent amount of water in this little pan of color, because if you run out, you're going to have to remix the color, and sometimes that's hard to get it to mix back to the same value that you had. Once you have water in your pan, using the tip of your bristles, you're going to tickle out some color into this water that's in your pan of color. You're going to tickle with the tip of the bristles until you've worked some color into the water. Now, in our flat wash section, we're going to move quickly. And we're going to keep adding in color until it begins to all blend together. We want it to be one flat, solid color. We don't want to be able to see darks and lights. We just want it to be a nice, solid color. For your gradient wash, maybe pick a different color just to make it more interesting. You're going to start by transferring some water into a pan of color. Just a little bit of water this time. With the tip of your bristles, you're going to tickle out some color into this water that you've put into your pan of color. Once your brush is loaded with color, this technique, watch it before you try it. Once you have your brush loaded with color, you're going to start on one side with your color And then instead of going back and getting more of that same color, go directly into your water. Start where you left off and pull it just a little bit farther. Then go directly into your water again. Start where you left off and pull it just a little bit farther. It'll go from a dark to a medium to a light. We get our watercolors to be lighter versions of themselves just by adding more water. The more water you have, the less color that's going to be there. The less water you have, the more color you're going to have. This technique, it's a pretty neat one. Wet on wet. We're going to lay down some color. While that color is still wet, we're going to rinse out our brush real quick and add in other colors on top of that wet color. And you'll see what happens. It's pretty neat. Let's see here. I think I'm going to get a little bit of this one. I'm going to tickle out some color. And I know I'm going to need a lot because it's going to have to stay wet. It needs to be enough so that it will stay wet while you grab other colors. And if you're worried about it not staying wet, grab water, mix it in with your watercolor. You want it to be nice and moist. If your color is not moist, this will not work. Now while it's still damp, it'll be shiny. The surface of it will be nice and shiny. While it is still damp, you're going to go in, grab another color, and add it right on top of that wet color. If I were you, I would use colors that are close on the color wheel. If your colors aren't set up rainbow order, just think rainbow order. And as you add in colors, because the color is wet, it's going to want to move and bend and bleed on its own. Let me see if I can get a closer version of this. Ta-da! Wonderful. When demos go bad. Well, that's pretty nice. There's still some shine to it. But I think that'll be okay. Give me a second. I'm going to grab some tape and the lights. Oh yes. Now we can see how these colors are starting to swirl and merge into each other. That's pretty nice. General rule of thumb for your water. If it gets so muddy that you can't see the tip of your brush in there, you should probably change it out for some fresh water. Mine is still clear-ish. I think it'll work for now. This next technique, I'm going to ready some colors first. That means I'm going to wet them in the pan and get them ready to use. I know I'm going to want to use some black. Don't forget to rinse out your brush in between colors. We got blurry. That's a little bit better. Okay. I know I'm going to want to use some little bit of red. But just a little bit. Okay. For this next one, for color bleed, your paper is going to need to be wet. So you're going to have water on your brush. Right now there's no color on my brush. I'm just going to put water on my paper. It needs to be enough to where your paper looks just a little bit shiny, but not enough that you have big puddles of water. Now, while your paper is still wet, you're going to come in, grab some color, tickle out some color, and touch it to that wet surface. Your colors are going to want to travel all on their own across this wet surface that we have. Don't forget to rinse out your brush in between colors. And you're just going to lay in more and more color. Rinse it out in between colors. pick up some more, add them in. I like to call this a color bleed because kind of like how whenever you get a paper cut and you don't realize it and you end up with blood all over your paper, you didn't even mean for that to happen. That's kind of how the color moves. It moves on its own with very, very little control by you. It's kind of neat. This is starting to look sort of galaxy-ish. You can go into a galaxy or not. It's pretty much up to you. But if I'm thinking galaxy, I'm thinking a dark perimeter. Close it all in. Maybe some more dark on the inside too. That's starting to look sort of galaxy-ish. From where you're sitting though, it's a little dark, but that's okay. I will be okay with it being a little dark for now. Your next one, our next technique, we're going to do something called a wax resist. For this, you're going to need some wax, crayons. Crayons are made with pigment, binder, and a large amount of paraffin wax. This is where the wax is going to come into play for our wax resist. For this, you're not going to make nice, light, pretty lines. You want to bear down hard with the crayon. Push down onto the paper. Make it nice and thick. Create some kind of a design, some kind of a pattern. Doesn't really matter what it looks like. This is just a technique. We are demonstrating different techniques, learning about different ways to use these watercolors to create different kinds of effects. Once you have your wax down, pick a color that's different than your wax. I think I'm going to go with green. Green and orange are two pretty different colors. I'll make sure I have a lot of water in my brush. You must have a lot of water for this to work. I'm going to use water to move around the color that I already have. The wax is going to resist the color from the watercolor. It's going to resist it. That's the resisty part of it. Resist means they're just not going to get along. Think about oil and water. They don't mix. Water and wax also do not mix. What I did just there, I dried off my brush. If you get to some points in this where you feel like there's too much color over top of your wax, that's okay. Grab a little bit of your tissue, dry the dampness out of your brush. Your brush is made to hold water, so we can use this dry brush to go in over top of our wax and pick up anything that's still wet. Most of the time with watercolor, if it's wet, it's going to have color with it. We can use that to just pick up some of this color they got on top of the wax. Just clean it up a little bit. Yes, that looks all right. Now for our next little bit. Tape, resist. You're going to need a piece of tape. I like to use just regular old masking tape, the white kind of papery. You're not going to need a whole bunch of tape. Just a little chunk will do ya. But take this chunk, rip it up into different shapes. We're going to rip it up into different shapes and create some kind of a something with the tape. It doesn't really have to look like anything. It's just going to create different kinds of lines, different shapes. See what kind of stuffs we can come up with this little piece of tape. One thing about tape resist, you want to make sure that it's pressed down to your paper really well. For instance, you're not going to just leave some tape that's sticking up on the ends just don't do that. Make sure you press it down. so that none of the edges are coming up. Once you have your tape pressed down, it's all nice and secure. Come in with a color bleed or wet on wet kind of a feel. I'm going to start with just some water. Right now my water's a little dirty, and that's okay with me. The water will help the color move a little bit better on your paper. Then I'm going to come in, grab some color, and just start painting. Right over top of the tape. Try and include all the little corners and edges so that way whenever we peel it off, you'll have a lot of really interesting little shapes and stuff. Once you have that guy done, we're going to move on to our next. There. That looks okie dokie. Okay, salt texture. You're going to be thinking about wet on wet and color bleed types of scenarios where you're going to put color down, but it's got to stay wet for this technique to work. If you take too long as you're putting color down and give that color a chance to dry onto your paper, this technique will not work. Make sure that your color is wet. It needs to be wet or it will not work. I'm going to use a color I haven't used yet, well, at least not much. Put a little bit of color down. If you see it start to get dry, grab some water from your water cup and just incorporate it in there. Let that color move around a little bit. I'm going to go with a wet on wet sort of a technique. I'm going to add in some more variations of this color, some colors that are very, very closely related to this original. But I'm going to move quickly because I can already tell it's starting to dry on me. And if it dries, it will not work. You're going to need a little bit of salt. While your paint is still wet on your paper, you're going to sprinkle salt directly on top of your wet paint. Right on top. Right on top. That's what you're going to do. We're going to end up waiting for all of the paint to dry before we do anything with the salt that's on top of our paint. Before we do anything with the tape that's underneath our paint, we're going to wait for everything to dry completely first. That is going to give you a salt texture. In some areas it'll look better than in others. The key is to keep it nice and wet. If you kept it nice and wet, the color is going to want to come towards any little piece of salt. So wherever there's a piece of salt, there's going to end up being a little ring of color that's just a tiny bit darker than the color that surrounds it. For this next one, color pickup. You're going to need a piece of tissue, but we're not going to leave it nice and pretty and straight like that. It needs to be kind of crunched up, wadded up. Yeah, crunchy, crunchy, crunchy. You want it to be nice and crunched up so there's some good textures going on. Hold on to that with one hand. With your other hand, you're going to do a nice wet wash of color. Any colors you want, really. See how it starts to dry out? So I'm going to go directly to my water cup, pull some more water in, and see how much farther I can move that color around. Maybe even pick up some more color. But it's got to be wet. For this one and this one, it's got to be wet. It's got to be wet. There's no other way. Got to be wet. Got to be wet. I'm going to pick up another color. Add in some more stuff. I think that'll give us a good thing. Now, while it's still wet, with your tissue, your wadded up wonderful tissue, you're not going to hold it to it. You're just going to dab. Dab, 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 dab. We're picking up color onto our tissue and creating this really neat, really weird texture. You can dab as much as you want or as little as you want, but don't hold it to your paper. If you hold it to your paper for a really long time, it'll take away the texture. It'll make it look a lot softer. If you want a soft look, sure, go for it. But if you want a textured look with a lot of cool lights and darks and stuff, just dab it. Dab it lightly. It'll pick up color, and you'll be left with a really cool texture. That is what we're doing Monday of this week. That's February 5th. We're going to finish it Tuesday, February 6th. On Tuesday, once we're done with this, we're going to get our landscapes back out, and we're going to finish our atmospheric perspective watercolor landscapes. That is all. Thank you for watching. Have a good life.